Okay, so the last Saturday, basically what we were looking at the receivable system option. The navigation to it was from the you know receivables under setup and maintenance financials, and under receivable functional area we have the manage receivable system option, and that is the first and foremost setup that is required, which actually controls a lot of activities within the receivable module. Okay, so as part of that we have seen uh, just a minute, some of the things as part of the revenue and billing. Okay, revenue and billing, what are the certain options, the mandatory options that we need to fill in to start with the setup activities. And then there is this cash processing tab, under which we have to enable some of the mandatory ones, and then we can go ahead with the remaining setups. Okay, so first, the other thing is that receivable system option is something that is defined each business unit wise. Okay, and even the enabling of the business unit for the receivable activities that I had shown you even previously when we were doing the payable. At that point of time, also we had discussed, like, assign business unit, business function, that setup. Basically, that has to be done in order to what do you say? Basically, enable certain functions or certain application related functions for the business unit. That was the first step. And then now coming to receivable, this is the system option that has to be set as the second step of configuration. Okay, so so I will show you back the billing and revenue, but then let us have a look at the cash processing. So cash processing is all about the processing of the payments that is provided by customer. Okay, now auto cash rule sets are there. These are all kind of advanced functionalities which you can explore later on once you are at least have a hands-on on the basic processes, basic cycle first. Okay, so our aim is to have a look at the basic cycle, understand the basic cycle, how to do it. That is creation of invoice. For that, what all are the mandatory setups required. Okay, similarly, creation of payments, creation of receipts. What are the mandatory setups that are required, and then how to process the receipts. So all the basic transactions. Okay, the related to that, we will have a look at the setups perspective. Okay, but then these are some of the advanced aspects which you can, by with time, gradually you can explore these aspects. Okay, now the mandatory one that we can see here is chargeback due date. Okay, so this is a mandatory thing that is enabled. Okay, so chargeback due date is basically chargeback is kind of an activity or a transaction for which how is the due date to be controlled or governed. So that is where you have multiple options available: deposit date, enter date, open invoice date, and receipt date. Okay, so that you can select. And then we will scroll down and let's have a look at the other accounting related aspects. So realize gain and loss, realize gain account, realize loss account, then similarly cross currency rounding account. So these are all the account combinations that are required. Okay, and account combinations required for from the accounting perspective to calculate and to account for the gain and loss. And similarly, in case of cross currency, in order to round off, okay, the rounding account basically. So this is the account that is provided. So this is mandatory account, which even first you will provide it in the billing and revenue section, which will get copied into the cash processing section as well. Okay, then automatic receipts. Okay, so when the automatic receipts are application process is done. Okay, so there is an automatic receipt application process also available. So in that process, how many invoices per commit are to be taken into consideration. Okay, so you can give the number of invoices per commit, any per process running, how many number of invoices should be processed. Okay, so that is what here it is. You will have to mention the number. So let's say 200 invoices maybe per commit. And similarly, receipts also per commit, how many to be included? 200. Okay, so just it requires a number. Okay, so if you just place your cursor here, you will see number of invoices the automatic receipt program can process before saving. Okay, similarly here also number of receipts the automatic receipt program can process before saving. So just give a number. Okay, 100, 200, 300, whatever the case is. But yeah, in real life business, this will have a importance when you take a requirement from the client at that point of time, this will be this will basically come up as a point which you might have to consider. All right. So these are the basic things that needs to be set up at the receivable system option level. So let me show you the billing and revenue again. So in the billing and revenue also, there were certain mandatory options like split amount. So split amount, basically, if you place your cursor, you will see this is to divide the amount of the invoices over and under, okay, for reporting purposes. Okay, similarly, application rule set, application of the discounts on the invoices. Okay, so what is the rule set for that? Okay, so this is certain seeded rules will be available, like the prorate all. This is a seeded one, so which you can utilize at this particular level. Okay, but then discount basis, what is the basis of discount amount calculation, that you can take it. Okay, and then allow on discount, allow unearned discount, partial discount. Okay, these are the things like discount related aspects. If you want to allow partial discount, discount on partial payment, then in that case you will have to enable it. Similarly, print remit to address and print home country. Okay, this is for printing options. Then these are the accounts, the mandatory accounts that are to be provided. Okay, like the realized gain, realized loss, tax account, cross currency rounding. Okay, then the tax transaction, tax invoice printing option. So how the tax invoices need to be printed. Okay, itemized, and some, these are multiple things, actually multiple types which govern the formatting of the transaction invoices. Okay, so you can select any one of them and see the how the print output will be. For this, you can further explore in the document also to see different types of what will be the impact of it. So accordingly, it will show you in the document how if you select item and sum, how the report output or the invoice will look like. So like that, you can just have a look at, because when you are creating, you cannot have that many number of receivable system options. So that is where you can just have a refer through the document. Okay, then document number generation level. So basically, the transaction document or the invoice document, when the invoice is recorded, then on the invoice, the reference number, the invoice number, how should it get generated, or at what level should it get generated? Okay, when the invoice, when it is completed, when the processing of the invoice is completed, or when it is saved or none. Okay, so how do you want the numbering to be generated? Okay, at what point basically? Okay, then allow changes to printed transaction. That means if you want that after the printing of the transaction, any changes if required needs to be allowed, then in that case you will have to enable this checkbox. Similarly, allow transaction deletion. If you want the deletion of deletion activity to be available, okay, then in that case you will have to allow this. But generally, you see here that there is a pop-up coming up. Do not select this option if you are legally required to number transactions sequentially with no gaps. Okay, so in such a case, the deletion option should not be provided. Okay, because it will raise auditory concerns and questions. Okay, then enable recurring billing. So we will see recurring billing a transaction. At that point of time, we will revisit this setup option to enable it. Okay, and then these are some of the transaction delivery using email. So if you want to send the invoices using email, then you will have to populate all these aspects. So from email, from which email ID it needs to be sent, from name, what is the name that should be displayed, then reply to email, to which email can they reply back, then email subject, include business unit in the email subject. That means the name of the business unit should be included. Then include transaction number in the email subject. So invoice number, basically, should it be part of the email subject or not, and the email body. Okay, so body means the message body. Similarly, statement delivery. So statements are also generated on a monthly, or there is a cyclical basis on which the statement delivery can be done. For that also, email option is available. So you can input all the details related to the email. Based on that, system will generate the email and send it out to the respective customers. Then grouping rules. So this is the grouping, invoice grouping rules. Okay. So enter the default grouping rule to use if the grouping rule isn't defined at the transaction source or the profile class levels. Okay. So basically, this is again for grouping of the invoices for each of the customers. Okay. So whenever there is an import activity, okay, for the invoices available at that point of time, grouping rule has to be defined. Now, this will be the default grouping. There are certain other places as well where grouping rules can be defined. Then auto invoice is a process that runs, okay, and in that process what is the maximum memory in bytes that can be utilized, okay, by the system. Similarly, what is the message log file message level, okay, so this has to be entered. So you can enter any random numbers that can be utilized, okay. So this is during the processing, for the processing of the program, for its efficiency, these things are to be entered, the auto invoice process. Okay, once you have entered all the mandatory things, then you will say save and close. Okay. So the system option, receivable system option is created. That is the first step. Let us see, verify it. See, if you try to search your business unit under this receivable option by entering here and clicking on search, if you don't find it, then just simply click on the blank search and then scroll down, okay, and scroll down and see. It has some issue in this page. When you try to search it out by entering the keywords and searching it, you will face some issue. Okay, so that is the reason I'm saying to do a blank search. Well, first try it. If it is not working, then do a blank search and scroll down and search for your BU and select it. Okay, let us see if the configuration is complete. Yes, it is complete. All right. Now the next step is defining the transaction types. Okay, so in our case, in case of payables, where we had seen the transaction type called standard, credit memo, debit memo, all were there already. Okay, but in case of receivables, it is slightly different. Okay, so you have the classes that are available. Classes, that means invoice as a class, credit memo as a class, debit memo as a class, and then few more types are there. Okay, so there are classes for those, but then under those classes, you need to define uh, the transaction types. Okay, that will be required by the business as per their billing activities. Okay, so there would be multiple revenue streams. Okay, revenue streams, multiple revenue items that they might be having. Okay, and accordingly, if they want the type of invoice to be defined, so that whenever the accountant sits in to create the invoice, simply by clicking that template, you are kind of defining a you can say a template. Okay, for each of the types. So if the accountant is junior accountant is someone who is entering the data, so he will just simply click the invoice type, okay, from the drop down based on the revenue streams that the business has. So accordingly, the the invoice would be the type of document would be created. Okay, so let's say for example they have multiple revenue streams. Let's say brokerage is one of their revenue stream. Okay, commission sales is another revenue stream. Okay, similarly, let's say any trading of goods, okay, or trading of services, let's say insurance selling is their revenue stream. Since they have multiple revenue streams, they would want multiple types of transaction, okay, which will indicate that these are the different types of a transaction for which if these are the different revenue types for which they have the transaction types, and accordingly they will generate the invoice. Okay, so that is where or Oracle has given you an option at the receivable level, receivable, in the receivable application to define multiple transaction types. Okay, with the class as invoice, debit memo, and credit memo. Okay, so let me show you that. So what is the task name? Manage transaction type. That is the task name from where you can define all these. Okay, so let me scroll down here. manage transaction type. Okay, click on it. Let me do a blank search so that you can see all the transaction types that are defined by multiple people. Okay, so you see here invoice, regular invoice. Okay, with the transaction class as invoice. Okay, similarly credit memo, which is mentioned as regular credit memo, and the transaction class is credit memo. Okay, similarly there would be a debit memo which is called a regular debit memo, and the transaction class will be a debit memo. Okay, but these are the regular ones. Okay, for a normal scenario when there is no differentiation, okay, between the invoice based on their revenue streams or based on their types, then in that case only a common name will be created. But then if you see here, do you see PA invoice? PA invoice is defined as again a class as invoice. Okay, and what is this for? Project accounting invoices. For invoices that are coming from the project accounting module. Okay, similarly, PA credit memo, project accounting credit memo for invoice for credit memos that are generated from the project module. Okay, with the class as credit memo. So similarly, your business you can take multiple your business may have multiple reasons to go with different types of invoice. Okay, so in that case, that many types of invoice with the class as invoice will have to be created. Okay, similarly credit memo also multiple types. So if there is a invoice, then there will be a credit memo also, the type of credit memo also that will be created, because there can be cases, right? For those types of invoices, credit memos can also come up. Okay, so if you want to look at other people who have created some of the example, do you see here INB Consultation International, okay, Training International. So based on their services of consultation and for based on their services of training, they have created two different invoices which mark that these type of invoices are for their different revenue streams. Okay, so accordingly, multiple options, multiple invoices, and multiple credit memos types can be created. Okay, it is the type that we are creating. Okay, so let us create a, sorry.
Here invoice number also you can give different, right?
Invoice number is not based on this.
No. Just I'm asking how we revenue generation we can generate in two invoices like training and these things are there. No, two are there. No, like that invoice number also we can make it different for different transactions. So I'm asking.
You mean automatic numbering?
Yeah, automatic numbering or manual we can do, but automatic also we can do. Can we do that?
Manual we definitely can do. Automatic can be done. There is actually another setup which is called the transaction source. Okay, that actually defines the numbering. Okay, so if you want for each type of transaction a separate numbering to be available, then that many transaction source has also to be created. So you will see that aspect. So that is kind of a workaround. Okay, it is not a straightforward approach, but that is kind of a workaround that we have. Okay, generally source is all manual. When we are creating all the invoices manually, it is all source as manual. But then that many number of manual, based on the number of transaction types, that many sources also has to be created. Okay, so we will see that aspect. So at that point of time, we will understand from where actually the numbering is governed. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So for our case, let us create a transaction type. So I will click on add. Okay, the transaction type set. So this set is what? This is the reference data set. Okay. Transaction type set. This is the reference data set that you will have to assign. Okay. So I hope you understand the concept of reference data set now. Okay. So reference data set, basically you can create custom reference data set and associate it to the, different objects. And then based on that, you can restrict the access as well. Okay. Restrict the access by, giving that particular reference data set to those people, okay, who are supposed to work on that. Okay. So in this case, we will assign common such that, across the instance, this transaction type can be utilized. Okay. Common set. So what I mean by this is reference data set. So let's say, for example, the business unit ABC Insurance Corp, okay, employees only should be able to see this type of transaction. Then in that case, a reference data set for specifically this ABC Corp insurance needs to be created. Okay, and then in return, it has to be assigned to the person who is working on this insurance BU, and also this set assignment need to be done at the BU level. Okay, so that for this particular BU, this reference, this type of transaction types are only visible for the ABC Corp BU and no one else. Okay, so that is where the reference data set helps. Now, common set is something that will give access of this particular transaction type commonly across the instance. So let me search for common. This is a, people have created actually multiple cases. I believe this should be the one. Okay. Give me a moment. Let me see. Okay, this is the seeded one. Okay. So this one, which is mentioned as common org, that is what we need to take. Okay. Now, legal entity, if you want to associate it to a particular legal entity, you can select the legal entity record. Okay. And then the if this particular transaction type is to be kept, for that specific legal entity. Okay. Then name. What is the name that you want to give? In our case, we will give it as insurance sales. Okay. As the name of the transaction type. Let me give the legal entity, our legal entity. Okay, and then description, I will say INV also, insurance sales invoice. Insurance sales invoice. Okay, and this is where you associate whether this is an invoice or credit memo or debit memo. by selecting the transaction class. Okay, invoice. So I'm associating this to be an invoice. Okay, transaction status, you need to keep it as open status. Okay, so invoices that will be created under this will have the transaction status first as open. Okay, and from date, from when this particular setup should be available for use. So a older date I will provide. Okay, creation sign. What should be the creation sign of this particular transaction type? So that also you can manage. Okay, so generally it is the positive sign for invoices, right? So that is where you will associate positive sign as the creation sign. Okay, generate bill. So this is for generation of the bill basically. So you want to enable it. So yes. Okay, then credit memo type. So if there is a credit memo type that you want to associate to this transaction type, then you can utilize that. So we haven't defined it. That is where we will define it and then link it. Link the credit memo to this invoice type of transaction. Okay, then application rule sets. So application rule set is what? Application rule set define how payment and credits reduce open debit items. Okay, so how the payment and the credits basically will help in reducing reducing the invoices, that is the open items. How to do that? That is something that will be governed by application rule set. Okay, if there is an automatic process that you want to use. So this is what something we had seen at the receivable system option also. Okay, so that you can select, but not a mandatory option. Okay, then payment terms. So this is the payment terms that you will have to enable, okay, or assign it basically. So payment terms, the concept of it, I believe you understand. If at all there is a custom payment set that need payment terms that need to be defined, then in that case you will have to define it for this particular business unit. Okay, and for this particular type of this one, the reference data set. Under that reference data set that you will have to define the payment terms. Okay, and then link it with this transaction type. Okay, so payment terms, the concept I believe you understand. There are multiple payment terms, multiple types of payment terms, immediate, net 30, and all of those things which you can associate. Okay, and which in turn governs a lot of other activities. We will see that as well. Right now, we will just keep it created as a blank transaction type. Okay. Then, okay, open receivable. So this is kind of an open receivable which will be like adjusted, or which will be closed whenever there is a receipt or a payment that we receive from the customer, or in the in if at all there is a credit memo available, then in that case, or credit memo or a debit memo that is available, then in that case it can be applied. Okay. So that is where you see this as an open receivable. Then post to GL. So if at all this transaction type can be utilized for accounting purposes, okay, then you will have to say post to GL. Okay, otherwise it will not get accounted, and it will not flow to the GL. The accounting will not flow to the GL. Okay, so that is something, again, for multiple reasons they have given this option. Okay, that you will understand in the real life business. When you go in, there can be certain types of invoices which they are just creating for record. Okay, it doesn't have an accounting impact. Okay, so in such a case, they would want it the post to GLS kept as no. Okay, so it depends from business to business, and also it has a significance from the policies, the governing policies of that country in which they are. Somewhere it might be considered not legal. Okay, somewhere it is okay to do certain kind of such activities. So depending upon those scenarios, it can be enabled or disabled. Then allow adjustment posting. Okay, so for this particular type of invoice, if adjustment posting has to be allowed, then that is enabled. Natural application only. So what is this natural application? That means natural application means only up to the amount of the only apply debits or credits to transaction with this transaction type that brings the balance at or near zero. Okay, only up to zero you can do the application to this particular transaction. Okay, not beyond that. Okay, so in such scenario, you will have to, this will be automatically, enabled. But if there are certain scenarios where you want to use the allow over application, then in that case, you will have to uncheck this and click on the allow over application. Okay. So you can try and test it out those scenarios, but right now we are going with the natural application setup. Okay, then let's have a look at the below thing. Now, this is something which is important. Okay, reference account. Okay, so reference account means basically this is the place where you give certain account combinations, which in turn will be something that you can, tell in, there is something called an auto accounting rule. Okay, in the auto accounting rule, you can instruct the system to pick some of these values, okay, based on the transaction types. Okay, so let's say, for example, if it's an insurance sales invoice, that transaction type that we have created. Now, what will this be for? For the insurance revenue, right? Based on that, you might have created this as a transaction type. And in turn, at the time of accounting of the invoice that you create under this, okay, transaction type, okay, you want that the auto accounting rule should consider the revenue account from this invoice type. Okay, then in that case, it is mandatory that you provide the reference account at the transaction type level. Okay, so there is a strategy that you have to come up with at the time of implementation by discussing it with the business. How do they want the revenue of the revenue accounting to get generated? Whether they want it based on the transaction types, if at all they are going to create multiple transaction type, or if it is any other type. Okay, then based on that, the decision will or the designing of the activities will happen. Designing of the processes will happen. Okay, so anyways, at least one of the reference account has to be provided along with the business unit access to this particular transaction type. Okay, so let me click on add, and I will give the business unit first of all here. So I told you in receivable, this is some issue. If you face this kind of issue, then do a blank search. Okay, and scroll down and select. And make sure your business unit, the naming starts with some number, because, so that it appears at the top. Okay, so I'm selecting ABC Corp Insurance BU here, and I will provide one of the account. Okay, let me say revenue account. So such that I want, based on each of the transaction type, the revenue accounts be selected. So insurance, probably I won't have any revenue account for that. This is expense actually. Okay, so let me, for time being, let me take this. Okay, so just consider this as an insurance sales. Okay. Okay, so this is the revenue account that I have associated to this transaction type, and click on OK. Okay, other accounts also you might want to provide if that is how your accounting rule strategy is for. Okay, then in that case, based on whatever the significance is, you will have to provide this. But right now, since we need to enable it, and at least one of the account needs to be provided, and that is the reason I'm just providing revenue. But we will revisit this section again, okay, when we have a look at the auto accounting rules. Okay, and then this is save and close. So we have created the transaction type, okay, as in insurance sales. Okay. Now let us create a credit memo also associated to it. Okay, again the transaction set name. Okay, name I will say insurance credit memo, insurance sales, CM. Okay. Transaction class will be credit memo. Okay, transaction status open. Okay, and okay, that you can set, and the sign should be negative sign. Okay, and generate bill, yes. Okay, and application rule set. Okay, in this case you want to set the application rule set for the credit memo application. Okay, so you can set it, but then again it is not a mandatory option. Okay, open receivable, post to GL, natural application only. Okay, and then you will have to assign the reference account. First of all, you assign the business unit, and then the revenue account or any other account as a reference account. Okay, so let me take this, and I will go to account and select consulting revenue. So let's consider this as the insurance revenue. Okay, and then I am selecting the combination and click on OK. Okay, so this has been entered, and then I will save and close. Now I'll go back to the invoice and link the invoice to the credit memo type. Okay, so how do I do that? Again, I will go back to the search and I will select, I will search for what? I will search for the insurance and search. So here I'll go to the insurance sales invoice, click on edit, and I will attach or link the credit memo type that needs to be utilized with this invoice. Because you will see from the invoice itself, in the transaction process, from the invoice itself, we can create the credit memo so that you can directly apply the credit memo. Okay, now in such scenarios, it will automatically take up, if there is a credit memo type that you have linked with the transaction type, then automatically the type will be selected when you create the credit memo. Okay, otherwise you will have to manually input. So that is the reason, or that is how this linkage helps. Okay. So this credit memo, I am linking it with this type of invoice. Okay. And even application rule set, I will say set as prorate all. So that means whatever lines are there, okay, revenue item lines are there against, or item lines, you can say, in the invoice level, against all of that, apply this prorate the amount of credit memo or the payments for that matter against all lines. That is what it is mentioning. Okay. And then I'll say save and close. Okay, similar fashion, you can create the debit memo also. Now, what is the case of debit memo in case of receivables? Okay, debit memo is not the same. It's not the same concept as we had seen in payables. Okay, payables, both the cases, it was credit memo or debit memo. Both the cases, it was to reduce the invoice balance. Okay, or the supplier balance, you can say, supplier liability. But in this case, and which had to have, the amounts had to be entered in a negative sign. But in this case, in case of receivables, the debit memo needs to be a positive sign. Why? The concept of debit memo when it comes to receivables is any additional charges to the underlying invoice. Okay, let's say, for example, an invoice was already issued to the customer, and you saw that by mistake the receivable accountant had undercharged it. Okay, undercharged the customer. Okay, I mean less charge was applied on to the customer. Then in that case, in order to rectify that scenario, a debit memo will be issued with the additional charges. Okay, so it is generally in debit. When it comes to receivable, the concept of debit memo is to add on to the charges, okay, of the original invoice. So again, let us create transaction type is common, and I will say insurance sales DM. Transaction class as debit memo. Transaction status as open. Positive sign, and here also do you see it is the credit memo that can be applied. Okay, so let us insurance sales credit memo that we are linking to this debit memo as well. Okay, and then application rule set, I'll say prorate all as the automatic rule. Okay, and then natural application only. Okay, fine, and then we will provide the reference data. So ABC Corp Insurance BU is what we are linking it, and the revenue again in this case also we will say 200, and account I am selecting the same account, consulting revenue, and I'll search, okay, so that I can get the entire combination that I had used earlier. So this combination has come up, selected, and click on OK. Click on OK. So now that account has also been, the BU has been linked, and also the one of the reference account has been provided, and save and close. Okay, generate bill as yes. Save and close. Okay, now all the three types have been created. Okay, now with respect to this, we will have to create a source as well. Okay, a source. So basically, a multinational organization will have multiple, sources of invoice. Okay, now with respect to other cases, also the case that you mentioned, right? Each of the transaction type needs to follow a separate. Each of the invoices, invoice types, they need to follow a separate numbering. So in that case, sources, that many sources will have to also be created. Generally, the source meaning of source is from where the invoice is originating. Okay, but then to have some workaround, like the case that you have mentioned, then in that case, multiple sources will have to be created, which in turn will be linked to this insurance sales invoice transaction type, and the numbering can be covered. Okay, generally source we define for manual cases, that is manual invoice entry, and also for imported transactions. So there might be a what do you say, over the counter sale point system, a separate sale point system. Okay, that is software I'm talking about. Okay, a billing software. There would be some, let's say for example, when you go to hospitals, you go to the what do you say, the reception, and they punch out a particular OP number and all, right? So then based on that, you go to the, once you have taken the consultation, you go to pharmacy and all. Okay, they generate the bills, right? And even at the counter, they even at the reception counter also, they ask you for a certain consultation fee to be paid. So at that point of time, generally, in such cases, that would be some software that they are using, which is a leader in that particular industry. Okay, Oracle is kind of a Oracle Receivable is kind of a ultimate ERP tool, which is kind of a general ERP tool. Okay, that is not for the industry specific requirements. So in such scenarios, what businesses they do is they go for some leading softwares that are leading in the industry, which caters to the specific industry requirements, and they use that software. Then ultimately the final data, okay, is getting imported to Oracle. Let's say if Oracle is also their financial accounting software that they are utilizing, then in that case, at the end of the day, or depending upon, generally it is the day. Okay, at the end of the day, what they do is they do a integration with the Oracle ERP receivable, and they fetch in all those invoices into ERP. Okay, so that is where the source would be defined as that particular software point of sale system, as it is called. Okay, that software in ERP first they will define it, and then accordingly they will fetch in all the invoices. That is the concept of source generally. Okay, or in a very basic terms, when we talk about the source. Okay, so that is what you will have to define and even associate each of the source to the transaction types that you are utilizing. Okay, I think that's it for today. I mean, we will wrap up the session, and tomorrow we will start with the source setup. Okay, thank you, Daya.
Chandra, one more thing.
Yes.
Just for my knowledge, for
Hmm.
my information,
Hmm.
is post to GL is there? No, post to GL option is even in sales invoice or purchase invoices will do the same thing, right?
Purchase invoice, we don't have an option. Purchase invoice is all about payables.
Yeah,
There,
payables.
there we don't have an option to do this.
Okay, so when we enable that post to GL, then only it will.
Yeah, in receivables, yes. In
Then
receivables,
only
if the post to GL is enabled, only then the accounting will flow to GL.
that means P&L account will affect P&L or
P&L balance sheet all. Yeah.
okay, okay,
Otherwise, it will not.
okay.
Yeah, there are certain scenarios. There are certain business. It can be some business scenario where they just want to generate a document. Okay, but they don't want any impact on the financials. Okay, for some kind of adjustments. I don't know. I mean, many things can happen, and I have seen this being used in many places. Okay, they just want to raise an invoice. That's it. They don't want any financial impact to happen. In such scenario, they generally have this type of post to GL. They disable it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Chandra, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.